Pretty typical. I think it started fairly typical when I was about 14 or 15 years old. A friend of mine had a guitar, an acoustic guitar. I loved it, and I decided, well, let me try that. I think I want to do that too. That sounds pretty interesting. I've always been sort of fascinated with guitar, even before I started playing it. But when he had one, I wanted one too. And that took about a year until I got the first basic chords down. And after a year or two, I switched over to electric guitar. And I remember it was a very cheap department store guitar, like a cheap Japanese copy of a Stratocaster, but didn't even look like a Stratocaster. It had four pickups and many switches. It was horrendous. Very cheap guitar, but you know, we all got to start somewhere. When I joined the band, it was in 1976. 1976. I joined when I was 16 years old, 1976. And you know who one of the first players that I ever got into or noticed playing Flying V's was Wishbone Ash. Do you remember that? Well, to me, it was always more important to have an identity and to do what I'm good at rather than sort of chasing something that I'm not. You know, I think I discovered quite early on that I'm not the most virtuoso shredder type. That's not my deal, you know. I'll never be able to do that, but there's still a lot of other things that you can do, and so I concentrated on writing memorable licks and memorable riffs and songwriting, really. And then, yeah, I'm not a jam type player either. I try to play pretty close to the same thing every night on stage and try to play pretty much what I recorded. So I'm not an I mean, I like to improvise and do things spontaneously, but my performance is not dramatically different every night, you know. Yeah, and in the studio, like I said, I like to write memorable stuff that you can sing along, stuff that you can remember. I think that's more, to me, way more important than to be the flashiest, the fastest gunslinger out there. You know what I mean? Because to me, it's a lot of times that's boring. And I know it's some people are fascinated by all the, you know, the fastest licks and all that. But I love it when we're on stage and we play a song as simple as Princess of the Dawn, and you just play the first couple of riffs, the first notes, and everybody goes nuts and recognizes this and sings along. To me, that's more worth than, like, you know, a million miles an hour sort of shredding. Well, sometimes we go to places where you can tell people are playing, they're paying very close attention. Like in South America, they sing along to guitar solos and things like, really? They remember all that stuff? That's great. I mean, I love that. And that's part of the thing that brought me to music and brought me back to it, because we stepped away from it for a while and had a good long hiatus of over 10 years. But I realized the staying power of music is incredible. You know, here we are playing songs that we recorded 35, almost 40 years ago. That's crazy. I mean, who would have thought? Not in my wildest dreams did I think back then that I would be, in my age now, sitting in Copenhagen, Denmark, going on stage and performing that song that I wrote as a teenager. I mean, you'd never think of that way. And even the songs that we write today, I know they will be out there for a long, long time, and people will bring these albums for us to sign them, you know, for a long, long time, if we stay out that long. I mean, part of it started, maybe being a metal fan was being outside of what's trendy. So they stuck to what they liked, and whether Britney Spears was on TV or not didn't interest them, you know, or whoever Beyonce is not, you know, they don't go with what's hot, they go with what they like. And that will probably never change. They're not that influenced by trends and latest fads, I think. It's an ever-changing world, my man, and you know it as much as I do. But we're trying to concentrate on what we do best and write music and do what we can do. I mean, you can't change the world. It's fighting windmills. It's no sense in you know, you can't stop the world turning, and times are changing. I'm not complaining. We're doing fine. I mean, we enjoy what we do, and that's the most important aspect of it all. And otherwise, we wouldn't do it. I mean, we really came back for the pure love of making metal and meeting fans. 2000, when was it? 2009 we came back. Yeah. Really just a coincidence by finding Mark as a new singer. If we hadn't found him, we wouldn't be here. But we did, and we thought like that's reason enough to go out there and give it another go. See what happens, and miraculously it worked. We got a new lead singer, and it's going better than ever. Here we are working on our 4th new album of the new era, and yeah, it's going to be out later this year, and so things are moving along quite nicely. Well, first of all, I write all the songs they're all based on guitar riffs, so it always starts with a guitar. It never starts on a piano or anything like that. I mean, all the songs, or nobody writes down lyrics before we have a guitar riff, you know. So it always starts with me or Peter or both of us sitting together and jamming on some riffs. And so it's all based on that, you know. It always goes back to that. Just pure and simple, just plugging a guitar into an amp and getting inspired by the sound and by the attack and, you know, by the vibe of the riff. It's mostly, I make myself sit down and I play, and sometimes by accident I discover something and I go like, ooh, this is cool, I got to record this, and then jump to my iPhone or something and record it like that and go back to it later. But most of the time the stuff is created by, all right, today we're going to sit down and I'm going to work on some new material, and then, you know, you work on bits and pieces that you already have and try to come up with something that matches it, you know, so it's a lot of, you know, piecemeal work. Songs are really pieced together a lot of times out of different components. It's also quite rare that I write a complete song in, you know, one session and it's perfect. I usually go back and work on this bit, and I don't like that bit, and so it's a lot of tedious detail work in the end. Just the fact that they were different. You know, back in those days, everybody played a Strat or a Les Paul, and those were pretty much the only guitars available. And to me, a Flying V looked different, and it just looked cool. I liked it from the very beginning because it was so different. It was really like almost like futuristic looking, and yeah, so I was immediately attracted to the shape and the design of it. You know, because it looked to me like a stage guitar. This is something like a showman guitar. It's different. Just it stood out. You know, not everybody had a V. They were actually quite rare back then, believe it or not. I think it's the look, really, because it's not a very comfortable guitar to play. So it's really, to me, it's a stage guitar. You know, and I tell you a little secret. Even all in the '80s, I played mostly Strats in the studio. I've pretty much started playing a Stratocaster, and I've always been more fascinated by a Strat than by, say, a Les Paul or something. But the V just had the look, and I thought, like, heavy metal, that's about, you know, posing and power and aggression, but it also has to look good. You know, we want to put on a show. That's why we got two of them, and make it even more. It became somewhat of a trademark of us because of that look. But in the studio, yeah, I always felt, first of all, they didn't really have the sound that I wanted. And then they're kind of uncomfortable to play, and they're somewhat limited. And I always preferred a lot of things about a Strat, like the longer scale to me had more attack. And I preferred the sound of a Strat and the neck pickup with a single coil. That always was more my vibe. But on stage, you know, it had to be a V. Like I just mentioned, the fact that I always like the Strat because it's, to me, it's got the rounded body, so it's much sexier guitar than just a, you know, a plank basically. And to me, a standard V was always like a plank, but because it is a plank, it's just a board cut to a V and then a neck put on, but it doesn't have any like contour. So that frame is V. We tried to do something where we took some of the features of a Strat and build it into the V. You know, so it's got a nice rounded body. It has a tremolo system, which is very important. It has a long scale of the Fender Strat, the Fender scale. They're pretty out there, huh? The finish is great, yeah. I told them, well, they asked me, what finish would you like? What's some of the things you've never seen on a guitar, or what's the widest thing you can think of? I said, you know, I really would like it to look like a World War II bomber, you know, like those riveted aluminum type bombers that had the decals in the ladies, and I sent him some artwork, and this is kind of the look I have in mind. And when I got the guitar back, I was blown away because they made it look so realistic and so cool and so different. I'm really loving it. Yeah, it's actually it's wood. I don't know. They have a system how to. It's just paint. It's still a wooden guitar out of. The body is out of maple, interestingly enough, because I wanted a lot of the again. I didn't want a mahogany body because the mahogany is very smooth, but it, you know, for metal and riffs and stuff, I think it's better to have that attack of ash or maple. So that's why I took the long scale, and that's why we experimented with wood, and we came up with maple for the body. Well, they did really. They gave me a few different prototypes, and I picked the one that, to me, made the best sound. I was an EMG player for years and years and years, and recently I discovered those Fishman Fluence pickups. They're also active, and yeah, they work great. And they actually wired them to my specifications. I went to Fishman and we tweaked them. It's actually quite cool. These are really revolutionary pickups. They work really well. They're active, and the funny thing is, they have a new technology. It's not a traditional coiled wire anymore. It's a printed, very thin layer of circuit boards stacked on top of each other. I don't fully understand it because it's not my job. I'm not an engineer. But they showed it to me, and it's totally trippy. It works. It's amazing. And you can, and you can actually tweak the sound of these pickups. You can make them sound this way or that way, and change characteristics without rewinding a pickup because they aren't wound to begin with. You know, so that's pretty neat. So these are custom pickups made to my specs, and that's what I use. No, it's a regular fretboard out of ebony, tiger striped ebony, I think they call it. Yeah, the frets, like I said, the frets are stainless steel. I don't know anything more about it, but I really prefer stainless steel because they last forever. Because I play really hard, and I discovered even after, sometimes after a few months, I see the first dips, and well, I can't really claim it all, but I had some influence on it. I gave them my ideas and my wishes, and then they did the rest. Marcus Framus is an old German company. They've been around a long time, but they're recently making some really high-end guitars, and they're really trying to get into the more high-end side of things with their guitars. They're also the maker of Warwick basses, which have been around, I don't know, 25 years actually, I think, or longer. I have 24 frets on most of them, yeah. I've got some with 22 frets. I've got the single coil in the neck position. So a lot of features of a Strat are in that V. It just looks, from a distance, looks just like, a great V, but the closer you come, the more Strat features you will discover. So to me, it's the best of both worlds. Yeah, Frames guitars, Warwick basses. So same company, and yeah, I've been in touch with them or working with them for four or 5 years now. Never been happier, because honestly, this is the first signature guitar that actually turned out the way that I wanted it to. Because a lot of times in the past, I told what I wanted, and then you get an instrument and it's okay, but it's not like you would hoped it would be. But in this case, man, this is the guitar I play every day on stage and in the studio, which is something I was never doing in the past. Usually I played it either or, but yeah, especially if you have old guitars that you've maybe carried around for. But honestly, I have a collection of maybe 25, 30 guitars, some of which I never take. Most of them I never even bothered to take out of the case, because I've got something that works. Now that I have these signature guitars, I think honestly why even bother playing anything else? Occasionally I want a different sound, or I've got a favorite old guitar, but 99% is just recorded with what I play on stage. No, I know, that's true. I don't have a gazillion sounds either. I mean, I've got 2 or 3 sounds that I like, and I use them every time, every record, and it works every time. Once you find something that works for you, that's what you use. And it's the same with me. The search is over for me, So a lot of people always thought like Balls to the Wall was played with that V that I had for years, but it wasn't, it was a Strat. But it could have been a V, but I preferred the Strat, always did. Put a humbucker in the Strat and it sounded, you couldn't really tell the difference, but I could feel the difference. Then, because it was the time of the Sputnik designs and the wild fit. It looked, positive, futuristic, and I think those were the times. And you can see it in the architecture from the 50s, and I love that era for design work, I think it goes back to what I said earlier. Probably, I can just speak for myself, what attracted me to it, like I said, because it was different. It really screams showmanship, and it's a stage guitar. It's made for the stage, and back then it was almost outrageous. Not everybody had seen one, and over the years, I think it became synonymous with metal and aggression and stage acting and all that. People like Schenker and myself and others using it, and Judas Priest. Everybody. I mean, all the guys that I admired, they had one. you know. So I wanted one too, and maybe it's the next guy goes, oh, he has one, I want one too. Maybe that's how it all came about. I don't know. Yeah, a lot of people don't like it because, like I said, it's awkward when you sit down. You don't know where to put that horn, and it's first of all it's huge, and maybe that's one of the reasons why I thought it was so cool because it's a lot of guitar, you know. Especially when it's white. And that's why we picked the color white because you see this damn thing. You know, if you got a black guitar or a black Les Paul and in pictures, you can hardly see it. But on a, you know, if you got a lot of, you know, a big honking piece of guitar. Well, that was my main goal on that album because I didn't want to get in the way of the orchestra, and I didn't want the orchestra to get in my way. So I didn't compose it per se because I used existing classical compositions, but I arranged the pieces so that it's a give and take between the orchestra and the band. And other than that, this has been a long-term project of mine. It took me almost 10, 12 years to make this album. I started early on, even before Accept got back together, because I've always been fascinated by classical music, and this is a follow-up album to a previous one that I made in, I forget when, the late 80s. Been doing this for 30 years, I think, to combine classical stuff with metal elements, or actually to use classical elements in metal, I should put it this way, but this is the first time that I actually used a full orchestra and made a full album out of pieces that work.
If you should choose, what should be your legacy as a musician and a guitar player?
Well, how do you do that? How do you answer that question? I don't know what to say. I mean, it's up to people. Do you mean what's going to be on my tombstone? Yeah.